Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea. I'm your host as always, Elwood Jones, and joining me, of course, is my co-host, Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello.
On tonight's episode, we continue our season-long look at female directors of note as we move on to We Need to Talk About Kevin from 2011, directed by Lynne Ramsay, a psychological thriller drama starring Tilda Swinton, in a role which she should have won an Oscar for, but unfortunately failed to be recognised by the Academy. Co-starring John C. Reilly and also Ezra Miller. Here, Tilda Swinton plays a acclaimed travel writer, now turned recluse, after her son commits a massacre at his high school, and now forced her into her current situation as she looks back on the events leading up to that fateful day. So, Kim, I mean, obviously, slight change of pace this time round from the films we've obviously looked at previously. Lynne Ramsay, the Scottish director, this being her third feature film, having previously directed Ratcatcher in 1999 and More Than Seller in 2002. She had originally been attached to direct The Lovely Bones, only to clash frequently with the producers who had wanted a version more faithful to the novel than the one she had been planning, and hence causing her to refer to the project as The Lovely Money, which ultimately saw it being removed from the project and the film being given to Peter Jackson, who was more than willing to give the producers a version of the film that they wanted, leading to much critical disdain from people who saw it. But it did obviously lead her to direct this film instead, based on the Lionel Shriver novel, and certainly when the novel came out, this was one of those books that everyone seemed to be buying at the time. It was just one that everyone seemed to be wanting to pick up, and it's despite that, it was one I didn't actually look at until the film came out, and there was something about this film, be it the fact it was Tilda Swinton in a leading role, or just the concept of a film that was questioning, can a child really be born bad, that really sort of intrigued me. So when I saw this, I actually went back and read the book, and I have to say this is actually a very good adaptation of a very good book. So opening thoughts on this one, Kim, because obviously this isn't the lightest of films, to say the least, and certainly when we look at Ramsay, she's a very on the nose style of director. She doesn't tend to do things very subtly. She just tends to make tends to just sort of put it all out there, and in particular the color red featuring ever so prominently here right from the start and throughout. But what's your opening thoughts on We Need to Talk About Kevin?
I think We Need to Talk About Kevin is, well, obviously it's a heavy content, but at the same time, it's a movie that I think every time I watch it, the one thing that I think the most is really, it's a movie that really lingers in your mind afterwards because of just how it ends, and you're thinking a lot about Kevin as a character, whether he is supposed to be, he was affected by, I don't know, trying to win his mom's attention in this really drastic way, or whether it's a nature or nurture type of thing, or what's his purpose behind the whole thing, because obviously we're at the end, we're going to talk about it more. There's never really a clear answer as to why he does it. It's really, there's a lot of, I think if you talked about subtleties, I think it's really the story subtleties of how it's laid out that really brings the, it's like slowly we start realizing that it's about his son being part of a massacre, right, at school. But when we first start, we don't know. We just know that she's getting a lot of grief over a lot of things. We see, scenes from the back. At the end, we finally have all the pieces get put together because the story is intriguing, because it kind of moves between the past, where she recalls these events, to the present. And then you constantly have these scenes that pop up, which are very disturbing, which is just sirens and things like that. And I think one of the big things about this movie is really how it uses sound. Like, just using the sound around that's very effective for the scenes, whether it's like focusing on water sprinkler in the beginning or whether it's the siren sound. But everything's there isn't really like a subtle soundtrack in the background. There is like a soundtrack where the songs, I was actually looking up all these songs that was playing during the movie, and it was just like the song titles actually match the scenes really well.
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack itself is a combination of score by Johnny Greenwood, who's of the band Radiohead, and at the same time it's a lot of ragtime blues that the film sort of punctuates itself with, and even randomly throws in pieces of sort of traditional Asian music in there, just to sort of really play up her sort of background. Is in Tilda Swinton's character Eva, to his person who's originally had this sort of lust for life and travel and culture, and is now was sort of forced as a result of motherhood into living a more grounded life, and ultimately one of a recluse after her son's actions. So the soundtrack itself is really kind of weird. It goes from the sort of ambient sort of moments to the sort of more soundtrack, those sort of more random sort of like blues elements that feature throughout, and I'm not sure it's the sort of soundtrack I would sort of like go out and buy specifically, but there's certainly got some interesting bits and pieces in there, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go and buy it, but I think that in the, like, sometimes, like, say during a scene where something is going on, and then you have, like, Buddy Holly's Everyday plays, and it doesn't really match the situation. Like, it's one of the songs which really stands out in that scene, because it's not something that matches the tone of the movie. It actually turns into this really, like, happy thing, and the story is anything but. I mean, she really, really struggles with her relationship with her son, right from being a baby up to being older. And it's something that we never understand why, right? Because in some ways, the relationship between Kevin and Tilda Swinton's character Eva is very is kind of a little baffling. Just because in some ways it feels like he wants her attention and, I don't know, maybe her love, because there's a lot of times where he points out where she's used to him. That was what he used in one of the scenes, is that she's used to him, but doesn't mean that she likes him. So there's a difference between that, because when she's explaining about having a younger sister, he can get used to it, but he doesn't have to like it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when it comes to Eva's relationship with Kevin, I mean, it's right from the start is a very sort of detached relationship that she has initially, that you assume it's a case that is down to the fact that she's perhaps postnatally depressed, or the fact that she's now been, because we see her throughout her pregnancy, when she's at the prenatal classes and all the other mothers are there with their bumps and they're all happy and all glowing, and she just feels very detached from the situation. And even when she's sort of thrust into motherhood, she finds that right from the start she has this almost combative relationship with Kevin. I mean, he cries incessantly when he's around her, but at the same time is perfectly happy when he's around his father. And this is a relationship that only continues to deteriorate as it goes on, as he becomes like a toddler. He actively resists like to be educated and toilet training, and as he gets like a 7 or 8 year old, and he's still in nappies. And he proves himself that he's a very intelligent and aware child, and you feel the fact that many of the things he's doing is just to continue this combative relationship that he has with his mother, to the point that she's just constantly being broken down as a parent to the point, even to the point where she sort of loses it after he intentionally stalls himself, and leading her to throw him against the wall, breaking his arm. And he tells his father that, you know, he fell, only because it manipulates the relationship that he has with Eva all the more into basically keeping her under his control. So whether he's through his behavior or through this secret that the two have between them now, he's just constantly pushing her buttons frequently, and it only sort of gets worse the more the older he gets, and sort of like those real sort of psychotic tendencies of Kevin really start to show themselves. So
yeah, but at the same time, you know, we have that scene in the middle where he suddenly changes when he's sick, right? And then she's taking care of him, and then he starts being very dependent on her. But it's kind of confusing because, you know, right after he gets better, he's back to normal. Like, he's back to his, I don't know, his rude child self, you know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when he gets sick, it's that desire to be nurtured, to be looked after, and it's sort of like the sort of maternal, the instinct is to go to your mother, provides that sort of caring, nurturing self that you sort of crave when you're sick. Your father's there sort of like more for the guidance. And I've assumed that was the reason that he sort of reverts into actually being a good child when he's sick, and obviously reverts right back as soon as he gets better. Because let's face it, I mean, he's an absolute little shit right from the start. I mean, this is what brings into question is, like, can a child truly be born bad? And certainly when it comes to the case of Kevin, you can't help but feel that this is the case. It's not so much the case of the environment he's being brought up in. Is just his actual nature.
But then you think about it, and you think about it, and we fast forward, right? The incident is over. She goes to visit him. We're at the ending scene, and he originally knows why he does it, and then suddenly when she asks him again, like, why, he's like, I thought I knew, but now I'm not too sure. And then you wonder whether there was something a little deeper. It's not something just because if you think about a lot of the things that Kevin does, it's a lot of things that stem from, I feel like, in some ways, maybe how he was, like, how she resisted him. Because a lot of times, I don't know, I mean, at least Chinese people believe it, that if you're resisting a child, they'll feel it. And then when they are born, they will be like a grumpy child, like it'll have effects on them, type of thing. I don't know how accurate that is. It might be just a stupid little belief. But in his case, it really feels like he resists the fact that his mom doesn't like him. Like, that, you know, she wants to be traveling. She doesn't want to be taking care of him. She resists her a lot. Resists him a lot about this whole bringing him out. She doesn't, you know, but then you can't really blame her because in one way she kind of feels like this kid has just been horrible to me. So
certainly, yeah. I mean, no, I totally get what you're saying when she has that moment where she sort of snaps. And I think this is the thing. When I saw the film when it first came out back in 2011, and this is probably one of the first times I've revisited it since. Yeah. And obviously, becoming a parent and stuff, you tend to viewing it in a completely different light than I did perhaps back then, where it was sort of more on the surface level. And then when you obviously go through what she has as a parent, I mean, it's certainly, you can understand many of the situations that she faces where she has that moment when she absolutely breaks down. It's sort of like has that never wish you'd been born. It's sort of like, if you hadn't been born, I'd be in France. And this sort of longing for this alternate life of what her life used to be. And I think this is certainly transposed really well at the start, where we see her at the La Tomatina festival, the big tomato fight festival that they have in Spain. And we see her sort of like on this like amazing travel experience, and then it's intercut with her life now, where she's basically living this life where she's basically keeps herself sane through like alcohol and pills, and her house is like constantly being vandalized by people throwing paint over her car and her house, and you're not sure why people are being so mean to her when you're sort of seeing it, but it's sort of like you can. Even as this life she's living now as a recluse, there's still this sort of longing for the life that she had, where she was this respected and acclaimed travel writer, and now she basically works in a travel agent. It's such a downfall her life's taken, and it's sort of like, when we like look at what Kevin did, I mean, was this the ultimate plan, like to really just destroy his mother's life completely by doing this, knowing that he was like leaving her as the person who was going to be left to pick up the pieces of his actions? Because certainly when he's like interviewed on TV about after the first anniversary of the massacre, he's like very he's just like playing it up for the cameras. He's sort of like about, like, speaks really cryptically about how everyone's just basically watching people like him. That is all about the attention, and it shows very little remorse. And obviously, people wanting someone to feel remorse for his action have just basically transposed all the rage onto his mother, which provides so many fascinating moments throughout the film of just how these people treat her. Like, she's going to lunch and then suddenly she gets like slapped in the face. She goes to the supermarket and comes back to find all her eggs have been trashed, and it's just like, I think this is what's so great about the film when you watch it the first time, because you're not sure why these people are just so mean to her, and then when you watch it like the second time, you obviously know why all these sort of things are happening to her. But at the same time, she sort of like takes it upon herself that this is her burden to carry. She never tries to pin anything on her son. She still carries this responsibility for him, even though after everything he puts her through.
This movie is more, I think it's hard. It's not so much that you look at, I think that Lynne Ramsay had a really, when she picked up this project, it's such a great project because the source material itself is so good. There's so much discussion point in this. I'm not like, if you think about just how, I don't know, I actually think she executes the movie pretty well. Just like with the actors, and at the same time just how she structures everything so it's revealed. It's like you said, like the first time you watch it, it is a big surprise, and I think the biggest surprise is you don't notice those little details of like this time I was looking and I realized that the people that that she meets in the street, like slaps her and then breaks her eggs and all this stuff, they end up being like, in the scene right after is the person that's crying, and then you don't know what happens, right? And at the same time, you start seeing, these little images start putting together. Obviously, we don't get the big picture until the end, when we have that final kind of scene of all these pieces are finally put together, and we have that whole scene about him just being just finally the cops cut through the locks and then whatever, and then they come out, and it's as you watch. I don't know. I think as you watch Kevin's character transform, I guess, throughout the film, at the same time you're watching Eva's character transform throughout the film. It's interesting to see how, I guess, just how they've adapted to the situation, I guess. In some ways, I mean, at the end, she's really come to terms with Kevin and what he's done. And I think it's just, at this point, he's all she has at this point. She has no one else. And, just like the coworker being very rude to her at the Christmas party about no one wanting her anymore. I think it's something that wakes her up in that sense, where she realizes that, you know, no matter what he's done, he's still her son, her responsibility, and she's still taking all the crap for him outside of the jail, right?
Oh, definitely so, and I think this is a film with no matter what she does, every time she seems to get this like little glimpse of happiness, like when she gets a job at the travel agency and she thinks that she's basically settling into a sort of normal-ish routine when she's like at the Christmas party, and she seems actually happy for the first time in the film, and then she rebuttals her co-worker's attempts to pick her up, and basically he just like says to her, you know, it's like, do you think anyone else is really going to ever want you? Which is just like kind of dark. But this whole Christmas party is really kind of out there to begin with, because it seems that everyone in the office is hooking up with each other, and they got this Christmas cake where an elf seems to be having his way with Father Christmas, which I have no idea where they got that ornament from, but somebody's there putting their cigarettes out in the cake as well, so I don't know if it's like a real sort of representation of what sort of people these are, or just like everyone's just really trash. But there's also a shot of the guy who we see earlier who's like DJing with the headphones on, and we see him outside the building again, and he's still got the headphones on, he's dancing away, and it's like, what are you dancing to? It makes no sense.
I don't know, I feel like that guy's kind of like your little slice of comedy type of thing, just to like liven things up a little, because the movie's such a heavy content. But you know, I think another head scratcher of this is the fact that I think what makes things worse in reality for their relationship is really how Eva is different to Kevin as she is different to Celia, the younger daughter.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like Kevin's a little shit. Okay, there's no doubt about it. He's pretty bad. But at the same time, is he really like what is he like a sociopath? I really don't think he is, though, because if it was the case, he wouldn't feel. I feel like maybe there's a little bit of remorse at the end, maybe a little bit, or maybe. But then is he just manipulating her? But then,
definitely Kevin is a sociopath or a psychopath, even. Excuse my lack of psychological understanding of the difference between the two, because I mean, you can obviously be a psychopath and not kill people. It's all about the interest in self. And I think when you use the introduction of his younger sister Celia, it removes the idea that this is a child who's been created by his home environment, because she's the complete opposite. I mean, she's lively and cheerful and full of life, and when you look, she's been raised in the same environment that Kevin is.
But in reality, if you think about it, is it? Because if you think about it, maybe Dad is the same. Dad treats both of the kids the same, and in fact, Dad actually prefers Kevin because it's the boy thing, right? You know, got boys. I can teach him bow and arrow, which is wild. And then
so you said that's wild. I guess we had just a different childhood, so
I don't know. I want to learn bow and arrow.
I grew up
now.
in the country, so
I never wanted to learn bow and arrow when I was a kid, but I actually have been recently thinking about learning bow and arrow, like so like learning archery.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, but if you think about Celia, she's less hostile towards her. Like Eva, like the mom is much less. She's a lot more doting and caring, and willingly takes her out to places, and it's a different.
But I mean, you gotta remember. I mean, the fact that she probably not put her mother through the same thing that Kevin did when he was growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that she had to he just cried incessantly, so she had to stand next to the pneumatic drill to sort of drown out his cries, and the film does a really good job of eliminating a lot of these sort of causes. I mean, is it the home environment? No, because Celia grows up in the same environment as she's saying. Is it because he's is he like autistic? And it's like, no, because the doctor does the test early on, and because she assumes that he maybe have hearing problems, that's why he ignores her. And it's like, no, every single thing that gets like eliminated. And it's really once we get into teenager Kevin that we start to really get the insight into the psyche. And certainly Eva attempts to connect with him and tries to meet him on the ground, because she obviously goes like the traditional good parent route, and he just rebuts it. It's sort of like, oh, you can create a special room, when she like makes her office with all the maps from her travels, and Kevin destroys it. And we get into teenage Kevin, and she like decides, I'm just going to take a complete different slant, and I'm going to meet Kevin on his level. So she takes him to play mini golf, and she openly disparages the fat people at the mini golf thing, and it's sort of like she's trying to get inside the sort of psyche of him, and it takes him off guard. But obviously once they go to dinner, he sort of like pretty much just like lays out what her whole plan would have been, and just like belittles her over dinner, which just sort of really, I think if anyone's seen sort of truly outlined his true nature, I think that was the one that definitely did it. I mean, he's the person who just cares nothing about anyone else's emotion. He cares only for himself. And at the same time, he's become so adept at hiding what he's truly thinking within himself, because he tries to like go for his room and find clues about what he's thinking or what he's doing, and only in turn manages to like fry her computer and most of her work computers as well through a computer virus disk he leaves lying around with like this sort of like I love you message on it, so it sort of like throws off and makes her so want to see what it is, only for it to, like, as I said, just to fry all our computers. So, so I think when it comes to Kevin, I mean, once we get into that teenage thing, and I think it's a real sort of credit to Ezra Miller, who obviously plays teenager Kevin onwards, who just really sort of nails the psyche of this character. And we have that wonderful moment when she goes to the prison on Christmas Day, and then there's the other mother who, I'm assuming is in a similar situation. She's there to see her criminal child. We don't know what he's there for. And they just sit next to each other, and she's upset. And then Eva just puts her hand across and just holds her hand. And there's this unspoken language between these two mothers that no one else is ever going to know the life, understand the sort of like the life they lead, yet, and the love for their children that society has basically shunned. So it's this sort of unspoken connection between these two women, which is just an absolutely fascinating sequence. I think it's one of my favorite moments of the film, certainly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was one of those moments where we start realizing that, despite everything, Eva, even if they sit there and don't say anything, all like the many scenes we see them just sitting across from each other, not talking.
Yeah,
she still shows up. She still makes an effort to show up. And I think that in the spectrum of what he's put her through and all the things that goes on, she still sets up a room for him to come home to and all that stuff. And it's, I don't know, this movie is a ride. It's like a psychological ride. You come out, and I just don't know. I mean, sometimes I think that, I don't know. Sometimes I want to think that I think one of the main things is that you really wonder whether in this world there's someone that's horrible. But then at the same time, there are like tons of serial killers that we know about, or that have been whatever, right? So it's not like an evil person doesn't exist outside. But then sometimes it's hard, because I feel like Kevin has a lot of different things, Sure, he's he just doesn't jive with his mom. But at the same time, you have this thing where I feel like his upbringing did have an effect on who he is. It kind of maybe made it worse, I think. like sped up the process, because at the same time, he decides to do this right after they announce divorce. They were pretty much, they're planning to divorce, and he overhears it. And then that sort of thing. And then at the same time, you think about it, he learns bow and arrow after that whole sick time, and then she reads him Robin Hood. So, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things that are connected, and there's something so, like, I don't know if I'm just overthinking it at this point. I just feel like I need to find some purpose. Because every time I finish watching this, I'm like, I'm so confused. I don't know why. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't figure. It's just one that really makes you think, and then you think, and then you think, and there's so much, like, one person can look at this and be like, okay, well, this is his nature. Obviously, he's a bad kid. He's just a bad seed. We see all the evidences. Celia grew up in the same environment, like you said, and she's fine. She's a very sweet child. She gets her eye burned out, and then she's still comforting her mom, which would never have happened with Kevin, right?
No, I mean, Kevin, I think would use it more against Eva if it if a situation had happened, the same way that he still torments her over the fact she broke his arm as a child.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the interesting things about the film. I mean, when you first watch it, I mean, is it this like play on the bad seed sort of genre, the idea of this what it is about Kevin that just makes him bad, and obviously ultimately leads him to carry out this massacre with a bow and arrow to his skull. And then obviously when you can also look at it as this sort of treatise on the strains of parenthood, is particularly the idea of a parent dealing with a difficult child. There's certainly many of these moments that sort of resonated as being a parent, and that you go through and you sort of sympathize with this sort of child, with Eva's sort of journey through this. The loss of identity and self that comes with being a parent, the things that you sacrifice, and this longing for a life that you perhaps led, or that you could have taken, which are played frequently throughout, and at the same time it's punctuated with these beats of comedy and just really fascinating cinematography, such as the scene where she goes to prison, see him the first time in the prison, and he's just ignores the whole time and just like laying out his fingernail clippings in front of her. And then we see an almost identical scene with her doing the same with a piece of broken egg shell that she picks out of her mouth, and she lays in a similar pattern on her plate. So there's all these like questions that it sort of like leaves you with. Is it sort of like that makes you wonder why Ramsay chooses to shoot these moments the way that she does, and the fact that she can still she like builds all this tension, all this drama around Eva's attempts to try and find a way to sort of carry on with her life, and she still manages to punctuate it with these moments of comedy, like when she gets visited by the Mormons, and they're like, "Oh, do you know where you're headed?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going straight to hell." So thank you very much. So which I've always just had fantastic. This has to be said. I mean, this is one of Tilda Swinton's best performances, and it's a rare leading role for someone we've come sort of like used to seeing playing these sort of like standout supporting roles, be it like as Gabrielle in Constantine, or like in Snowpiercer. We just get used to her playing these sort of quirky supporting characters. So for her to finally have a leading role was absolutely sort of fascinating, because it was sort of like this and Only Lovers Left Alive, where I could sort of think where she sort of had the chance to really sort of shine as a leading actress. And she has such great chemistry with John C. Reilly, who plays the father, Franklin, which I was not expecting. I mean, John C. Reilly, again, another surprising actor. I mean, he's mainly known for like doing like comedies and very sort of slapsticky, sort of out there sort of comedies, and here he gets like one of his rare sort of more dramatic roles, and he's just so underrated. I mean, it's up there with Carnage's performance here, and he has great chemistry with Tilda Swinton's character as well. So the fact that I would never have put these two together as being like a believable couple, yet they're completely believable throughout. I totally bought them as this couple. I mean, while he obviously is like this oblivious father figure, I think largely due to the fact that Kevin's like switches personalities whenever he's around his father. He's like this caring, loving someone around his father, and he's just an absolute nightmare around his mother. So, but again, is this like the playing up the childhood trope that, you know, where your parents like say, oh, you now your father's home, you behave, and things like this. The idea that you often you often act better for one parent than you do the other. So, but yeah, it's as it is. I found this viewing a lot heavier than I did the first time I watched it. I didn't realize it was going to be as heavy as it was. So it's certainly it's certainly a film that sort of poses more questions than answers questions the more you watch it. So, because I thought I had this all figured out, like after that first watching, and then I watched it the second time. It's like, no, I still have questions to ask.
But that's the thing is, I think the second viewing, what it does for movies like this, which you already have questions in the first one, is that the second one shows a lot more details and clues that you probably missed in the first one. And that's what happened for me, at least. That I noticed all these little things and these little contrasts and these little clues here and there. And then you start noticing, you know, I mean, yeah, it's like, seriously, kudos to the cast in general. Like, I don't know if Ezra Miller will ever get a role like that stands out as much as this one. Or even, you know, Tilda Swinton obviously is a great actress, underrated as heck. But I mean, I think it's amazing. Like, obviously, you know, John C. Reilly steps kind of out of what we know him and into, you know, it's out of his comfort zone a little, and this isn't funny at all. Even if he tries to be like a great father, and like his scenes are more lighthearted, kind of. But yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't know if how much watching. It's kind of like an American Psycho situation where there's no amount of watching it which is gonna kind of untangle. You're never gonna have an accurate answer to what the situation actually is, because we were never given an answer, and you can only piece it together to what you believe happened. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I think like Eva, you come to your own peace with the situation.
Yeah, you know, I made a note for this recording, and I was like, never has a movie ever been so on point with their movie title. We need to talk about Kevin. We literally spent 20 minutes talking about Kevin. So
that was the mistake in the film. Nobody ever talked about Kevin. That was the thing. They never sat down and addressed the issue. So maybe
that's the thing is, you know, that's another little element of the movie where if they had addressed that something was, you know, maybe mentally wrong with him, would it have changed the situation, right? You know, there's just a million things of what ifs and maybes, and is it him or is it a collective amount of things going on or whatever, right?
I had to ask, as a director, I mean, I've yet to watch any of Lynne Ramsay's other sort of films at all. I mean, certainly You Were Never Really There is the one that I keep saying I'm going to sit down and watch, mainly because it's Joaquin Phoenix. And I've certainly heard very good things about her. I've not seen her previous two. I mean, does this sort of inspire you to go out and see any of her other works at all?
If it's less heavy than this one, maybe. It's just, you know, I mean, if I came across it, then yes, I probably will. But I think that the deal with some movies is that, you know, we need to talk about Kevin. What really stood out was Tilda Swinton and Ezra Miller. And up until we did this season, I never really realized it was directed by a female director. So, you know, obviously with that in my mind now, I probably see if I can find some of her other movies just to see if it's the same sort of thing. But it's like I said, she had a really good set of cards in her hands. This source material, this premise, and adapting it's really great piece of source material to adapt. So what would be interesting to watch would really be to look at a movie where she's the person who, it's original content. There's nothing to be adapted from. It's something that maybe she wrote, or she is directing what someone else wrote, but something that's just not already with some, that's not an adaptation, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, certainly when it came to when we compiled this season, I think it was certainly the presence of Tilda Swinton that made me want to revisit this film more than the fact, as I said, of who was directing it. And certainly when we compare it to the other directors of this season, I mean, obviously we had Amy Heckerling with Clueless and Karen Kusama with Girl Fighter. I think those were directors whose work I think would certainly held more interest in me than her work as the Ramsay's work as a director does. So I said I still have to watch You Were Never Really There. So
yeah,
but
to be fair, I'm not discrediting her as a director though, because we need to talk about Kevin is, like I said, it's executed really well. She had a hand in the screenplay. And at the same time, if you look at some of the scenes are structured and how she centers her camera when it subtly pushes in or pulls out from a scene, everything is done really nice to build that kind of focus point and to really kind of elevate the movie, and just using the different elements of, working with just choosing the right type of music and choosing the right type of sound effects and amplifying certain things. A lot of things are executed really, really well to kind of really elevate just the atmosphere and the tone of the movie, and just kind of like that creeping feeling of I guess there's like this unsettling feeling, especially when you have certain focuses on certain sounds, like even just the water sprinkler in the beginning and she's pulling into just curtains in the wind or whatever. Or just the constant police sirens, and then you have these clatters of people and all these sounds that are going on at the same time. They really build the movie to have this kind of to have that kind of tone that it really needs, and creates that atmosphere that this sort of story really kind of pulls you in.
Well, yeah, I mean, in 2007, Ramsay was rated number 12 in the Guardian Unlimited's list of the 40 best directors working at the time. And LA Times columnist Mark Olson basically cited as being one of the leading lights of young British cinema, which I find kind of hard to believe, because, I mean, Ramsay is in her 50s, so how old is old British cinema, really? So, but, each their own. I have to. Well, obviously, I mentioned already the fact that Tilda Swinton was ignored by the Academy for her performance here, and I certainly felt that it was one of the biggest snubs in a year that also saw Drive being snubbed as well for the Oscar. I mean, ultimately, the best actress at Oscar would go to Natalie Portman for Black Swan. Certainly another engaging role, to say the least, but I would still argue that Swinton's role here was a lot better, as it is. I mean, for yourself, I mean, do you think that this was a role that should have been recognised by the Academy, or do you think that they made the right choice in giving the Oscar to Portman for Black Swan?
I haven't seen Black Swan, so
okay.
I can't really answer that. It's been sitting on my shelf for a while, but I haven't really seen it yet.
If you thought this was grim viewing, that's certainly another whole rabbit hole to go down. That one is. It's basically Aronofsky's take on Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue. So that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. Thank you as always for listening. If you wish to follow us, we are on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also check out our full archive of episodes at moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, where we also feature various writings, and we also have our Friday Film Club, where each Friday myself and Kim both pick a film to highlight. Sometimes there's a theme, sometimes there's not. Either way, it's a chance for us to explore the films that we love. But Kim, where does our season take us to next?
So we're heading into the next one. We're going for 2014's A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, directed by Anna Lily Amirpour.
Yes, certainly one of a first-time watch for myself, and certainly a unique take on the vampire film, with Amirpour obviously more recently producing The Bad Batch, so very interested to go and see this. And it's also by a film produced by one of my personal favourite production companies at the moment, Spectrevision, headed up by Elijah Wood. So I'm very excited to obviously see, check that one out and see what it's like. But that's obviously all coming up on our next episode. But until then, thank you as always for listening. Thank you to my co-host Kim, and we will be back next time to discuss A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.